Before we get into the nitty-gritty of the session, I would like to start in the spirit of reconciliation to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connection to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders, past and present, and we extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. For those of you who have not come across me, my name is Pam. I'm joining you today from the land of the Ngunnawal people. If you feel confident and comfortable, please pop into the chat the lands from which you are joining our session today. Today's session, we will be hearing from Janet Burke. Janet began her career in early childhood education, working with children and families across Australia, England, and Canada. She became Australia's first play therapist in the paediatric palliative care at Bear Cottage, and she now leads the Child Life and Music Therapy team at Sydney Children's. With a master's in counselling, Janet brings compassion and insight to her work supporting families throughout life's most challenging times. As you may have read, during this session, we're hoping to cover why this experience is hard, but also normalise responses when recovering from hospital stays, how hospital experiences can have lasting emotional impacts, the importance of emotional expression and giving feelings of space, and how best to identify your needs and feel the confidence to ask for help. I am beyond excited to be sharing space with our guest today. She's one of my favorites, and I always learn so much from her. My favorite thing is I just love how much care and compassion she puts into the support she provides families just like us. So without any further ado, welcome, Janet.
Thank you so much. Hopefully people can see the screen now. Yay, we're winning on the tech. I also want to acknowledge I'm today on the lands of the Gadigal people and acknowledge their history of caring for family and kin over many, many years. I'm really excited to be here with you guys today. When we talked about this topic, the first thing I want to acknowledge is that the group that got together to talk about what was needed contributed most of the content here. I might have said more than once to Pam, I'm not sure why I'm coming to this talk. You guys could do it. Obviously, you guys are the experts in this, but I think that sometimes it's helpful for all of us. I actually had a session with a client this morning and she was saying, my doctor doesn't understand why I'm so tired. And then we went through all the things she was doing and she was like, and I kept saying, now, does it feel sensical to you that you're tired? It makes a lot of sense to me. And I think sometimes it's that thing for many of us where we have so much going on. We have, particularly as carers, and I will name not to reinforce the gender binary, but often as women, we have many, many separate to-do lists and we don't sticky tape them together and realize the enormous load that we're carrying. We keep each one running. So just really, I guess, wanting to take the time today to normalize that when you come up against a healthcare admission, that brings with it a lot of things that are often out of control and a lot of systemic issues that can be really difficult. And so it is completely normal and absolutely expected that after that there might be a bit of a collapse, and hoping to offer, I guess, a couple of resources that I've found helpful, tools that you might want to dig into. And again, just with the hope, I'm very aware I can have perhaps too many. This podcast, this quote, this illustrator, take what's there for you. I'm leaving a whole lot of sprinklings here because different things land differently with different people. So, what we're going to touch on today, as Pam has already said, is we're going to touch on three things. One, I've already talked about a little bit. It's completely normal to have this kind of sense of post-admission exhaustion, collapse, regression, maybe sometimes for kids and maybe sometimes for ourselves as adults. As part of that, I really want to give a little bit of honouring to why in the Western world we're very poor at acknowledging, expressing and processing our emotions, and why it's actually increasingly research is showing fundamentally important to make a little bit of space and time or a process that works for you to make that happen, because it has massive health impacts if you don't. And a little bit of time, I guess, to just touch on how do we get in touch with what we need? I don't know about anyone else, but I've had someone say to me, "Oh, what do you need?" And I was like, are you speaking a foreign language? I can't even, what I need doesn't occur to me. There's so many other people's needs on the to-do list. And so how can we actually make a little bit of mental space to get in touch with our needs and to obviously have them pre-identified before we fall into crisis, and to start to learn, as uncomfortable or sometimes maybe unsafe as it might feel, that it is okay to ask for help. And I've popped a little trophy here at the bottom. I'm going to ask a question. If in the group, if it feels safe, you could close your eyes. You don't need to. Within this group, put your hand on your heart if you know it to be true that if during this webinar you got a call or a text from a family member or friend who was in a crisis and needed help, that you would contact them immediately before you even checked in on your own capacity or availability. And I'm just going to put that there with all of us. And I've popped this little trophy here because I think it's a great one. I'm going to refer to this beautiful illustrator a little bit more later, but this was a post I came across this morning, and she said, things you'll never get a trophy for. She's like, there's no trophy for never asking for help. And so there, I think for many of us who identify as carers, there's this very unbalanced thing where we will jump in without any consideration of our resourcing to help others. It comes as second nature, but we feel it is an enormous burden. Should we ask, or inappropriate, or showing weakness, or unfair, or just impossible to articulate, I actually need some help this time. So the first part that we've touched on a little bit, it is so normal post any kind of healthcare admission. And I'm going to, I guess the definition of that can be quite broad. It might be an unexpected trip to emergency, and certainly following the stats in the hospital, those can be anywhere from 2 hours to about 32 on the worst of weeks. It might be a planned admission. It might even be a clinic appointment where things go awry. But that thing of having interacted with this giant healthcare system, it is really normal to feel, particularly when it goes on over an extended period, exhaustion, potentially to start to touch on burnout, and maybe even to be traumatized by what has happened. And I think that one of the things that we really want to lean into today is, how do we create permission for ourselves to hold space to be with those feelings that we're experiencing, and to approach the feelings and ourselves with kindness and grace and compassion in the same way we would give our children, our colleagues, our partners, our friends, maybe our parents, that grace, compassion, and kindness if something hard was happening for them. It's really important to remember, I think, particularly when we're talking about, as we are for you guys, some kind of an admission where your child has maybe had an operation, maybe been critically unwell. Of course, your focus naturally is on, why am I feeling bad? The terrible, hard thing is happening to them. And it's really important to remember that the terrible, hard thing is happening to you and to your child, and also to your broader family often. And certainly when we first met, Pam articulated beautifully kind of that ripple out effect on the family. And then if there are brothers and sisters, who's looking after them, and how's that being coordinated, and how that can be hard to be in that role at home. And so for me, one of the things is, when I meet families in the hospital, the word I would use is whirlwind. Like when you're often in that just, I don't even know when I can have a shower because I don't know when the doctors are coming and we weren't expecting to be here and we haven't got all the stuff we need and the script from pharmacy hasn't arrived yet and it was supposed to be here 4 hours ago and we thought we were being discharged today, but now the other team has a different opinion. That just completely overwhelming, whirlwind, bamboozling kind of knock you off your feet is the word that comes to mind for me. That often happens in a hospital because my observation would be hospitals are a system and they don't always center humans and people and their feelings. They center process and protocol and policy. And so finding the people in the hospital, might be a cleaner, might be a child life therapist, I hope so, or your music therapist. It might be a particular nurse on the ward, but where are the people who do center your humanity and give you some acknowledgement for how hard it is? And how do we all start to learn to make space for that ourselves? And the thing I wrote here is in micro moments, because I'm so aware. I've sat in the chair of a counsellor and had them say, you really need to have better self-care and you really need to make time. And I remember wanting to just put my hands on my head and go, she's not listening to me. I don't have any time. She's telling me to make time. Where am I going to make? I don't have a time machine. Where am I going to make the time from? But how do we embed things into what I call micro practices? So the examples I can give are when you just are sitting next to that hospital bed in emergency and no one can give you the update on when you might actually go to a ward or be discharged, and you can feel that tingling pressure rising in your chest. How do we check in on that? And I'm going to refer a little bit later to two really, I think, valuable bodies of work. One is Kirsten Neff's stuff on self-compassion, and the other one is a guy called Richard Swartz stuff on internal family systems. I could do a whole talk just on that, so I'm going to keep it brief. But for me, one of the things I do now is a lot of self-talk. So it'll be like, oh, I notice you're feeling really stressed because this feels really out of control and it doesn't feel like anyone's acknowledging how hard this is. I'm here. It's hard. It's okay. We can do this. Right? That's 20 seconds, 30 seconds. How do we embed little tiny micro practices? That might feel way too woo-woo for you. You might be like, really, Janet, I'm going to sit in the hospital and put my hand on my heart and talk to myself? Oh, that doesn't feel right. For you, it might be grounding. Okay, what's 5 things I can see? What's 4 things I can hear? What's 3 things I can touch? It might be 5-finger breathing. Everyone's going to have different things that will help bring them into regulation. So it's really that, like we say for kids in the hospital in procedures and things, it's no good we try to do the deep breathing while we're having the hard procedure. We have to practice the breathing techniques beforehand. And same thing for all of us. We have to tend to working out what it is that helps us when we become dysregulated to come back into a sense of balance and feeling okay enough, which I think is really important. I think there's this kind of like, regulate yourself and come back. No, that's not going to happen when you're having a hospital admission. But how can you be okay enough to continue on with what's in front of you? And how do we just, again, make that space for ourselves? Usually, I'm going to say post the admission, with the knowledge that we are going to be exhausted. There are going to be feelings we didn't have the space to process. How do we lean on our communities or look at our to-do list and take something off and say it's not going to get done this week? And just give ourselves, even if it's 20 minutes, to, again, do whatever works for you. It might be journaling. It might be swimming laps in the pool and thinking about what happened and processing it. It might be, I love to put on a playlist and have a very loud sing and maybe a cry. Like, what is your thing? But actually physically honoring yourself by making a space to go, wow, that was so hard. And what I need right now is X, whatever it might be for you to process the feelings, the experience. I think the thing I'm imagining comes up for a lot of you is just the sense of being invisible in the system or not being heard. How do we tend to those very hurtful things when we can be around lots of beautiful humans in a hospital, but that energy of the system can just leave us feeling unvalidated, unseen, and unsupported? So I've put here, if anyone doesn't know the work of Gabor Mate, I would highly recommend his stuff. I think so. Gabor Mate is a Canadian general practitioner. He's done a lot of work on addiction and trauma. And I love his definition of trauma because I think it's really important to remember, as it says here, trauma comes from the Greek word wound. It's not actually about what physically happened to you. It's about what happens inside of you as a result of what happened to you. It's not the knock on the head that you get. It's the concussion that you experience post the knock on the head. And I love the reframe he gives to that too. He's like, that's actually good news, because he describes a lot in his work his childhood trauma of his mother having to give him away to strangers in trying to flee Nazi Germany. And he's like, if the trauma was that my mother gave me away, I can never fix that because it will never not have happened. It happened. But if the wound that I was left with was that because I was given away by my mother, I always felt unworthy and unlovable, I can work on healing that wound. And I'm also presenting this, I'm going to, I guess, bookmark this with, I don't know if anyone's seen, I should have put a little clip of her. I'll send a link after the presentation. There's a fantastic woman on Instagram called the Capacity Therapist, Raquel. We definitively have an overuse of the term trauma in our society at the moment. And I'm imagining in a heartfelt way for a lot of you guys that you might come across people in the school playground saying, oh my God, it was so traumatic. My child had to have their tonsils out. And you're like, oh, really and truly want to like, so that, you know, keeping it in mind that not everything that happens to us that is hard is obviously a trauma. But I do think that intersection, one of my colleagues has often, she frames it around the moral injury. Like when you go somewhere and the system just lets you down, that wound that you're left with can be really difficult. So what is it that we can do with this awful normal thing? So I think one of the first things, and I really want to acknowledge, like, even as I'm reading my slide, I'm going, this sounds a bit basic. People might be thinking like, oh, dear Janet. Sometimes you actually, like I said with my client this morning, you have to name it. And if you don't have a therapist or a partner who's in the space to reflect it to you, you're going to name it for yourself. Of course, we've been out of routine. As a family, we're disconnected. I'm completely exhausted from having to advocate. It felt like 15 times an hour for my child and for their needs. Just the naming of it quite often will give your nervous system a sense of relief, because what will quite often happen is our nervous system is trying to send us messages. This is not okay. This is not okay. This is not okay. And when we just push on and keep going and push through, it will keep trying. And just that moment of going, that was not okay. That was so hard. That was so unfair. We are so disconnected. We had a plan of how, Pam and I were talking before this call, how the term was going to run, and that plan went out the window and nothing happened the way we planned it, and how exhausting recalibrating everything is. So just naming it. Then how do we let go of our own expectations? And I really want to name here, there's a beautiful set of core Buddhist concepts they call the Four Noble Truths. And one of them is, it is actually our expectations of how we should be or how the world should be that cause pain. It's not the hard things that happen, it's that we expect they shouldn't happen. And so how can we let go of the expectation that we should be strong and resilient and bounce back, that we should just be able to snap back into routine, that we should be so grateful for a healthcare system that provided for the needs of our child. How do we let go of that and just sit with that tenderness and that pain and just accept that that was really hard? And that is a part of this journey that I keep wishing I didn't have to revisit, and I keep having to revisit it. And tending to the grief and the disappointment in that, rather than holding on to the adding. I always say to people in the hospital, there's nothing worse than adding shame onto something that's already hard. So the example I use is often with kids, where people will say to them, oh, come on, this needle isn't so bad. I did it with a 3-year-old today and you're 7. I'm like, oh, great job. You just added shame to fear. That is definitely going to fix the problem. Not. How do we do that for ourselves? We so often pile on shame, like, oh, I saw my friend is making soup for her neighbor and she only just got over this really difficult thing and I'm needing an afternoon nap. I'm so weak. You would never say those things to a friend. You would never say to a family member, I can't believe after that 4-week hospital admission that you didn't just jump back into routine. We would offer so much kindness and compassion. So how do we do that for ourselves? And then most importantly, how do we express what it is that's happened for us? And I really want to lean in here, like crying is not for everyone. Everyone's not a crier. I'm a crier. It's actually physiologically very good for you. It releases chemicals that actually help you to process what's happening. And I've added there that footnote, even in front of our kids. One thing we tend to do as carers, and again, Pam and I were just discussing this before, is that thing of, I will tend to how I'm feeling, but now the other kids need my love and attention and they're out of routine and they're upset and they're kids and I have to tend to them first. How great is it for our kids if we teach them that when a hard thing happens, you're allowed to fall apart a little bit and you're allowed to rest, and that we're able to say to them, yeah, you're right. Instead of when they say, are you okay, Mum? No, I'm fine. We say, do you know what? I don't feel so good today. And I know it's just because we were in hospital, and while you're at school today, I'm going to take a rest, or I've got an appointment with someone who can help me, or I've made a call to grandma, whatever your personal thing is. So we're role modeling to our kids that collapse and not being okay is okay. But we're not giving them the burden of, oh my God, my parents are a mess and they're not coping. We're role modeling to them, when I'm not okay, I seek help. And I know within myself the strategies that help me. And the other one I added here, and I think I've talked to this group about it before, but I love this woman, Trish Hershey. She has a whole organization set up called the NAP Ministry. And this around this thing that in the Western world, we have this concept that resting is weak and that our value is in our productivity and pushing through and being resilient. And she's like, BS to all of that. What an act of political resistance if we say, no, I will listen to my body. And when I am tired, I will rest, because I respect the autonomy of myself. I love her work, and I've put a little link there to a cool podcast and conversation with her. I got like a seesaw here on this slide. So this yellow little illustration is from the illustrator who did the trophy earlier. She's a Canadian illustrator, Holly, and I've put the Instagram link there. Her work is absolutely beautiful. But this one really stood out to me, and I don't know if it's true for anyone else, and maybe if it's true for you, you might want to pop your hand on your heart again. But in the middle of a really hard thing, the hard thing feels so big. And I know, and I will practice what I preach and show my vulnerability here, and I will sound like a very immature little kid. But yesterday I found myself, we had 2 family events on, and I was trying to get everyone organized and get out of the house. And I just found myself like crying in the bathroom, like, why can't anyone do anything for themselves? And why does it always? And I was just like, whoa. this is just a hard moment. It felt like I would never get out the door. I would never stop crying. It would never end, that people were entirely responsible, entirely dependent on me for their needs. And none of that story is entirely true. My eldest is 17. She's quite capable of being independent. But that just remembering sometimes and being kind to ourselves and going, yeah, this feels like it's never going to end, and it's so overwhelming and it's so hard. And this is just an event, a moment, a month, whatever it might be. But I have balanced that out on the other side with some stuff from one of my favorite Instagram psychology influencer people. I'm not a big fan of some of the content that you find, but I love the work of Adam Grant. And he says toxic positivity stigmatizes negative emotions. When people admit struggle, they are made to feel shame. Healthy support allows us to have unpleasant emotions. When people express pain, they can feel seen. Compassion is not telling people how to feel, it's showing people that you care by giving them the space to share. And I really love that, because I think everything in balance, right? It would be easier to look at that yellow blob and then shame yourself and be like, oh my God, I'm being so dramatic. This is only a week in time. The tricky thing is to hold both truths. This is not forever, but it does feel like forever. And that is exhausting and painful and sad and hard to deal with right now. And I'm very, very I don't even love the word resilience that much, because I think there's often a bit of victim shaming in it. Like, if you were just resilient, you'd be able to pick yourself up and carry on. And I think that it's really important. There's actually a beautiful children's book. I should have brought it with me. It's called The Rabbit Listens. I'll put a link to it with the presentation. And it's just this beautiful story of this little boy who has a hard thing happen, and all these animals come and tell him how he should feel and what he should do and how he should get revenge. And then this little rabbit just sits next to him, and he goes through all the feelings with the rabbit witnessing him, because he's ready and they're validly his feelings. I think we all have that experience, right? We're trained to, or we're socialized is a better word. We're socialized that our value is in the advice we can give and the support we can be to people. And it doesn't feel like doing something to just be with someone and maybe sometimes keep our mouth shut. And it's been a hard lesson for me to learn in my life, just that value of just making space to be with someone and validate their experience exactly as it is, rather than jumping in with, well, perhaps if you meditated, you would feel more calm. And my auntie said she tried this, and because when someone does it to you, you actually just want to bop them. Like, you just like, can't you see me? I want you to see me and my experience. So I think that tension is always there, how we honor for ourselves that this will pass, but we also don't make that like, it's okay, it'll be fine, next week everything will be back to normal. We honor both, that it will pass, but it's also difficult. This one just has a few resources that people might like. I often say, when I talk about this beautiful psychologist, Becky Kennedy, I hate parenting experts as a general rule, but I think she's nailed it. I think she has some of the best literature out there that you can find. And she talks a lot about that experience as parents of feeling like we always have to be okay and on top of things and role modeling control. And I love the little one in the yellow square here. Like, rather than saying, oh my God, my house is a mess, what are the people going to think? Saying, my house is a mess, but I am not a mess. I am good inside, even when there is mess on the outside. And I don't know about anyone else, but even as I said that, I could feel my shoulders dropping. Like, I think we wrap up what it looks like, what our coping looks like to other people, as a really true judgment on our identity and value as human beings. And what a powerful thing to just say, this situation is a mess, I'm not a mess. I can be good inside even when there is chaos around me. I really, really love it. And there's a little link there to a podcast that she did as well. The other little resource I wanted to offer people, and again, some people find this profoundly powerful, other people find it uncomfortable, but I really love the work of Kirsten Neff. I'm going to own a name. I don't love her accent, so I don't necessarily love listening. I find her voiceovers of her meditations quite jarring. I have other friends who adore the sound of her voice and find it very relaxing. You do you and find what works for you. But I think many of you would resound with Kirsten Neff's story. She's an academic from Texas, and all of her life's work is around the value of self-compassion. And she's done a lot of thorough research into what a difference it can make to quality of life and mental health and general outcomes if we actually have a practice of being compassionate to ourselves. And the thing I love most about her is she tells the story of when her son was diagnosed with autism. And she tells the story of being on a plane with him and him completely starting to freak out. And the spiral that she went into in terms of, oh my God, everyone's going to hate us. And everyone on this plane is going to think I'm a terrible parent. And everyone. And then the moment when she was able to just sit on the floor with him and go, oh, exactly as it says here, this is really painful. It hurts. I'm really suffering right now. Suffering does happen in life. It happens to everyone at different times. I'm okay. What do I need to hear right now? This flight is only a few hours. He's doing the best he can. I'm doing the best I can. And she said, of course, he calmed down considerably once she was able to center and ground herself. So on her website, I mean, if you search self-compassion meditation, you will find thousands, but she has a lot of beautiful ones. And her thing really is there's 3 essential things to really being self-compassionate. And it mirrors the stuff we just talked about in terms of when you come home from that hospital admission, we have to acknowledge that this thing is hard and we're suffering. We have to note to ourselves that we're not alone in that, because suffering is part of life and the pain often comes with our expectation, much fueled by Instagram, that life should be perfect and beautiful and your house should be in order and your kids should be in matching outfits and it should be stress-free while you're holding down a job and managing your child's disability and chronic illness, and also on top of everything for the family and home cooking, organic meals, blah, 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 blah. So just that, okay, everybody has pain and struggle. And then really being kind. What is it that I need? What is it that's happening for me? And you can often do that in as short as 30 seconds. Just remind yourself of those 3 things. So check out her work if it's something that feels helpful. The other little resource I've just put here, there's another fantastic academic out of Oxford. Her name is Susan David, and she's done a whole body of work on emotional agility. And her thing is that in Western society, which I'm a strong advocate of, we have a kind of delineation. There are good feelings and bad feelings, and we should avoid the bad feelings and lean into the good feelings. Like, it's not true. Feelings are simply signals from our nervous system telling us that something needs attention. And so how do we, as we've already talked about, be present to whatever the feelings are that are coming up for us? And she frames a lot of her work around this beautiful South African greeting. And it says there, I see you, and by seeing you, I bring you into being. And the word that they use in her home language is sawubona. And when you say that to someone, that's what you're saying. I see you. And that idea of, can we do that for ourselves? Can we see our feelings, and by seeing them and naming them and being present with them, allow them to be present and then pass through us? And again, if you look a bit into her work, she does an absolutely life-changing TED talk about her journey of losing her, I believe it was her mother, to cancer, and her finding journaling through that, and then her ending up on this life's work of looking into the importance of validating feelings from this pivotal moment when she wasn't coping at all. And this English teacher said, take this book and just write exactly what's happening for you, and don't try to edit it and don't try to judge it, and just be present with it. Her work is very beautiful. I have lots of journal articles. If there's any academic nerds who want them, I can email them to you. But the 3 key things I want to say about emotional expression and expressing our feelings is there is a ton of data, and one of the studies has gone on for about 40 years. And what they have found is when we try to shove down our feelings and suppress them because we have to soldier on and it's important, or we don't like anger because it feels like a horrible, unfeminine emotion that we shouldn't be expressing, it actually physically reduces our lifespan. It's a pretty bad outcome of emotional suppression. There's a lot of data that backs this up. Some of that is because of the things we do to suppress emotions, and I'll name and own mine. Mine is going straight to the cupboard to eat something to just shove that feeling down. For some people, it might be Netflix. There's lots of things we do that aren't in the best interests of the health of our body to try to suppress feelings. But some of it is literally thought to be just that feeling of the energy that we keep inside of us that builds up, and it physiologically impacts us. It's actually linked to really severe mental health diagnoses. So, for people who chronically suppress really big emotions, it can actually result in a mental health diagnosis. And the other thing that I've put on the end there that I think we reflected on a little bit before, just in that mentioning of not gaslighting our kids, that when their perception says we're not okay, we actually tell them the truth and say, yeah, you're right, I'm not feeling so good today. Healthy emotional expression is not just something really good for us. It's fundamental that we teach kids and young people around us that it's normal and healthy to do. And if we don't do that, if we're suppressing our feelings, and you guys are probably more in tune with this than most humans in the world, our kids know it. We don't have to say it. They know it, and they are not okay when we are not okay. And so how do we create, I guess, environments in our own families and households where we are allowed to be open and honest about how we're feeling? And there's a little reference there. Hilary McBride, if you Google her, has fantastic content on Instagram and on her own website about how do we be more embodied and present in our own bodies, which we'll link to in the last little bit around the things we need to do. I've just put these here, I guess, as a re-emphasis of that academic data for those of us who are not academic nerds. I don't know if anyone remembers growing up with the book Who Sank the Boat, where all these animals get into the boat and then it looks like it's the mouse that gets in that actually sinks the boat. But we all know the moral of the story. It's not the mouse, it's the cumulative effect. And that's what feelings are like. We can push it down, soldier on, push it down, try to ignore it and be avoidant about the difficult conversation that's required, push it down, not have a boundary and help that person even though we're not resourced. But at some stage it will come up. And so the other 2 pictures, the other book I love for this is We're Going on a Bear Hunt. And that I often say to myself, because a girlfriend said to me at a really dreadful time of my life, she was like, you can't go over it. You can't go under it. You got to go through it. And that thing of emotional bypassing it's not an option, particularly in light of data that's saying when we do that, it's so detrimental for our health. And the one that a colleague of mine uses is the Coke bottle. And if I'd been more prepared on it, but that thing that if you shake it up and shake it up and shake it up and shake it up, at some stage when you try to open the lid, it's going to explode. So we really need to make space for expressing our emotions. As I said before, in reference to that, Susan David's work, emotions, I find it, again, it sounds so simple, but I think most people still don't know it. Emotions are not facts. They're signals. And emotional suppression, as we just said, leads to poor health outcomes and disembodiment. And if we can treat our emotions as visitors rather than as facts, Or often what we do, I think, is as we enmesh our identity with them, and then we're like, I'm a bad person because I got angry at my kids about that, and a good mother would not get angry at their children. They would have been more patient. So I love this thing of, we don't say, I'm so angry today. We say, I'm experiencing anger today. I'm feeling angry today. I'm not anger. I'm experiencing or feeling it. And because I love Adam Grant, there's another little quote there: emotions alone don't determine our well-being. It's our relationship with them, how we view them, that matters. The evidence says that people who judge unpleasant emotions as negative have poorer well-being than those who accept that sadness, depression, anger, frustration, could go on, are just part of life. A key to resilience is recognizing that what feels bad is not always bad for us. And I think that we do live in a society that tends to pathologize and have a real delineation. There's good feelings and bad feelings. They're just feelings. So we've talked about so much stuff in such a short time. What is it that we do? What is it that we need? I think sometimes in the role of carers, and I think this is kind of circling back to the beginning of the talk, we can completely lose touch with any sense of our own needs. And I think that's a really good place to start. I listened to a beautiful podcast the other day, and the therapist was talking about she was actually a sex therapist, but she was talking about how do you just start to rewire a relationship with your own joy and desire? And she was like, it's going to be different for different people, but maybe it's food. Maybe it's just really allowing yourself a few minutes to really relish, like, oh my God, that was so delicious. And just really being in our own bodies and our own selves. And as humans, just acknowledging that we have different needs and we have different ways of coping, and that that's okay. Because I think, again, a lot of our judgment about what's not okay is us, and I'm pretty sure, it is the next slide, this idea that comparison is the thief of joy, that we make a judgment, my anger's not okay because that parent is not angry, or my sadness about this is not okay because that other person, my friend, seems to be coping fine with something similar. I don't know if anyone's seen this beautiful book that I love so much, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse by Charlie Mackesy. But his version of comparison of the thief is the thief of joy. I've just put next to there. And the little boy says, what do you think is the biggest waste of time? And the mole says, comparing yourself to others. And I think it's often the hardest things for us to do, and the most powerful practices to change our well-being are ironically simple. But they feel monumentally difficult. So sometimes one of the things that can be really helpful, which I've referenced a little bit before, is just that, how are we going to have a gentle conversation with ourselves about what we need? Again, I'm going to be vulnerable here and name my own. When I can be quite an anxious person, and the way that manifests is quite over the top controlling behavior. So my poor husband will hang out the washing and I will rehang it because he has not done it right, and it will not dry properly. And then I will be most annoyed with him when he's tried to do something nice, because when I'm feeling anxious, things have to be exactly as I want them to be. The other one I can go to is hyper independence. It's not, if I ask for someone's help, it's going to be so hard and so messy and they're not going to give me one. And I'm just going to do it by myself. And so how do we start to notice the patterns that we fall into when we are in distress, and just be very gentle and kind with those? And I'll reference again this internal family systems, the work of Richard Schwartz, and there's a little link there to a podcast if this is something that might be helpful. His theory talks about inside each of us, there is a perfectly perfect human who is creative, calm, capable. And what happens over the course of our lives is these little parts develop to try to keep that beautiful self safe. And the thing I love about Richard's work is in a lot of traditional therapeutic interventions, like say cognitive CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, the thing is, anxiety is bad. Let's get rid of the anxiety and get you to not be anxious. And his work is, how do we get curious with the part of us that's anxious? How do we say, oh, hey, I've noticed you're here again? I wonder, and in the work, I won't go into detail because it is very nuanced, but you actually ask that part of you how old it thinks it is. And you will often find that these behaviors are things you learned when you were quite young. And so just noticing when they're showing up, being grateful to them. Thank you so much, Control, for trying to make things feel better by micromanaging everything everyone in the house is doing. It's actually not going to help today. It's going to take up more of my energy, but I see that you're trying to keep me safe. And I'm really grateful for that. And in the therapeutic space, you actually you try to work with each part on what could it do differently. And I acknowledge straight up, if you don't listen to a bit of it, it does sound a little bit woo-woo. But I've certainly found it very powerful. Just that noticing our own reactions, responses, go-tos that actually are survival mechanisms, but maybe really don't serve us very well, but not being judgmental about them, being really curious and compassionate about how they evolved and how we might need to approach things differently as our grown-up selves today. So I think coming back to just finish off the very, very practical, and I'm just going to name, I feel like we could talk about this for like 2 hours and it still wouldn't be enough time. But how do we do some of the things we've talked about today? How do we start to make micro moments to notice our own needs or desires? And how do we start to keep a track of them? Because we're not going to be able to remember them in the middle of a crisis. How do you do simple things? And this was not my idea, this was Pam's idea. How do you make a list of, last time we went to hospital, what were the practical things that went to shit, that it really would be helpful that the neighbor puts the bins out, that grandma cooks some meals for the kids so they're not having takeout every night, the kids at home. If we have a bit of a pre-list of the 5 jobs we can give people, because I think that often it does, unless you're in the very unique position of having a very evolved group of friends or family who really can intuitively know what you need and have the confidence to show up and just do it without feeling like they're encroaching on your boundaries. It feels burdensome on your side when you're in the middle of a crisis and people go, I'd love to help. What can I do? And you're like, I don't know. What could you do? Just do something. Could you just help me? So that idea of having already thought so you can shoot it out. Or if you do have a really great mother-in-law or best friend or neighbor who you can just share that list with and say, hey, next time we end up in an emergency hospital admission, would you mind being the person, rather than 15 people contacting me to ask what help I need, would you mind if I defer them to you and you've got that list of 10 things that are helpful, and see if they can do some of those things and coordinate that for me? How do we think about who is in our support network? And most importantly in that, I think, who in that group can genuinely be with us in our joy and our pain? Who do we not need to be performative with? Who do we not judge ourselves around and start to make, oh no, I mean, it was so hard, but I'm fine. Like, I'm on top of everything now. It's much better. It was shit, but I've just got to get on with it. Who's the person we can sit with and go, F, it was so awful. I can't let go of my anger that things didn't get resolved for 6 days in a row, when in retrospect, it feels like they should have picked that up the first day. Who can be with your messy self? And I think there's an important preliminary question to that, which is, can you be, and it's certainly part of the work that I'm doing. Can I let myself be messy? And then can I find the people I trust my messy self to be with? And I think that you've got it now. I feel like I'm preaching to the converted, but that underpinning of how do we make space and time to be curious about the feelings that we experience? And I've put there, how do we invite them to tea? And if you Google Mara invites to tea, again, there's a beautiful Buddhist story about the Buddha, and I'll put a link with when I send the presentation through, inviting his enemy to tea. And that thing of often when we have the difficult conversation, we simply acknowledge the sadness that we're experiencing. Just naming it brings our nervous system down a notch immediately, because the feels seen and heard in the same way we seek to. I have finished off here with, I think, a beautiful set of illustrations by Holly again. And she's like, what are 5 lessons that we need to unlearn? That uncomfortable feelings mean something is wrong with you is not true, because grief, doubt, and loneliness are parts of being human. They're not signs you're broken. We have to unlearn that we have to change who we are to be loved. You weren't made to be like everyone else. You were made to be your beautiful, wonderful, perfect self. We have to unlearn that we do not have to be okay all the time. Sadness is not a problem. It's a sign that you have a connection to the things that matter. We have to unlearn that boundaries are selfish, because protecting your energy is an act of self-respect, not a betrayal of other people. And we have to unlearn that our worth depends on how much we do, which ties back into that nap ministry stuff. Rest doesn't make you lazy. Needing help doesn't make you weak. And you were already enough the day you were born. And I cannot believe, because I've just looked at the time. Sorry, everyone. I was like, that was probably 40 minutes, and it was more than 25 minutes.
It was wonderful. Thank you so much, Janet. So as always, I will extend our sincere thank you for sharing your valuable insights, your wisdom, and your expertise with us today. I know I got a lot out of that presentation, and I'm sure that everyone who's listening today and those that are going to listen in the future will all pick up some little snippet that will really resonate with them and hopefully make a portion of their life a little bit lighter. So thank you so, so much. To everyone who has attended today, and for those listening in the future, thank you for engaging with us. It really is such an honor to share all of this content with you. If you have registered in the coming days, you will receive a link for today's recording. You will get a copy of Janet's beautiful slides with all of her resources. Any additional resources that were mentioned during the presentation, I've been scribbling furiously the entire way through. We will compile a list for you. Janet's contact information will also be a part of that email. So if you have any really in-depth questions, or you feel a connection with her and the things she's sharing really resonate, please reach out. She would love to connect with all of you. And as always, there will be all of the 15 different ways that you connect and communicate with us at Alongside Families also attached to that email. Just very briefly, I want to remind you that we have launched our brand new Facebook community just for families who have a child with a disability and that additional stress of the high medical need. If you think that a supportive space where parents can connect with others who truly, truly deeply understand your journey, would like to share tips and advice while navigating hospital stays in the healthcare system, and would like to find encouragement on hard days and celebrate our wins together, please come on over and join us. I will make sure I put the link for the Facebook group in the resource email as well. It is really a very unique space, and I'm so proud of what we're creating. So please come and join us if you feel like that sounds like something you would like to be a part of. We do have a couple more events coming up for this term. We have, where are my notes? Sorry, they've gone. We have another medical webinar coming up later in the term, talking about kind of deep diving into the grief that's associated with our little journey. So links to that will also be in the email. And as always, all of the amazing events that we host on a term-to-term basis are all available on the Alongside Families website. Thank you all again so much for joining us and taking the time out of your day. Really appreciate it. I really hope I see you all again very soon at a future Alongside event. And Janet, once again, thank you so much for your time and wisdom. I truly, truly appreciate it. I'm going to let you all get back to your Monday. Enjoy your afternoon. Thank you all so much.
Bye.